Good day, everyone. I appreciate everybody making some time today to be at our listening session, co-hosted with with the Shakopee Wenwakatan tribe, as well as Native Americans in Philanthropy. I see that we've already had some introductions in the chat, so yeah, I appreciate everybody to say hi, introduce themselves in the chat, so we see all who's in attendance. Today we have a distinguished panel of tribal leaders, former tribal leaders, and tribal staff to talk about the important issue today of getting more financial resources from philanthropy to our tribal nations and indigenous communities. Before we get started, we'd like to have an opening prayer, and I'd like to ask Dr. Aaron Payment to provide us with the opening blessing for our day.
Ani buju, biwaka jigandishnakas, makwa magizi and odom. Bawating Banjaba, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Odawa, Otuaktami and Dao. Miigwech Wabanong, Miigwech Jamanong, Miigwech Ingabinong, Miigwech Gwednong, Miigwech Nokumasayak, Miigwech Misho Ayak, Miigwech Chiki, Miigwech Nabish, Miigwech Ndoroshabo, Gowin, Dimindibinda, Miigwech Ogichita, Miigwech Ogimak. So I just did our Anishinaabe-Mowin morning prayer. I won't recite all of it, but it's giving thanks to each of the directions, to our Mother Earth, to our waters. And then I also invoked an old Anishinaabe-Mowin prayer, which was Gawin Dimin Diminda, and it is it asks the question, are you my relative? In our old way, we established when we met each other how we were related, because we have a responsibility to one another. If you think of the spirit wheel teachings, each one of us is a spoke on that spirit wheel. No matter what we do in life, we either move towards the center of the spirit wheel, which is the creator or our unified creation, or to the outside, but no matter what, we're all part of that wheel and we're responsible for one another. So giving and helping our fellow people is actually our purpose. It's embedded in our purpose as the Native people. So with that, I hope we have a wonderful conference. Miigwech.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Aaron Payment. Appreciate that. Starting us off in a good way. Welcome everyone again. My name is Joel Moffitt. I'm a citizen of the Nez Perce tribe, and I serve as Director of Environmental and Special Projects with Native Americans in Philanthropy. And next, I'd like to introduce our CEO at Native Americans in Philanthropy, Eric Stegman, to provide a welcome. Eric.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you so much, Dr. Payment, for opening us with that beautiful blessing and starting us in a good way today. I share your gratitude, and I just want to say what an honor it is to have all of you joining us here today for, I believe, the third or fourth in our conversations that we've been having with Indian country. By way of introduction, I'm Eric Stegman, and my mother's family is from the Carry the Kettle Nakota First Nation up in present-day Saskatchewan. And I've been at the helm here at NAP for a little over 2 years. And one of the things that I realized when I came into this role very quickly was that a lot of the funders that we work with in the philanthropic sector really don't understand our tribal nations, and our tribal leaders were not at the table. Our tribal staff were not at the table in so many of these funding conversations. We meet with funders every day who are asking how they can support our education systems, youth and family programs, the whole gamut of issues that our tribal nations deal with. And yet our tribes are not there. And this is really an important opportunity for us to listen to Indian country and to better understand how we can shape a new platform for all of you to strategically engage with the philanthropic sector, to learn more about it, because it's a really strange sector with a lot of money that is definitely about as Western as you get. But this is our opportunity to change all that, to set a new table, and to hopefully create some really powerful new public-private partnerships with these funders in ways that we can actually coordinate those resources with our federal trust resources and others to really help our communities thrive in the future. So I just want to extend my gratitude to all of you for being part of this initiative. It's really been an exciting opportunity to hear from our relatives out in the field, and just looking forward to hearing the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And this is a very important discussion, as you just mentioned. We've had this will be our 4th listening session. We're going to have 6 total, going across Indian country and talking with the different regions and tribes all across Indian country. And it is a key component that has been missing in the philanthropy world. Actually listening to Indian country, and specifically tribal nations, and other indigenous community organizations. We have looked at the amount of resources flowing from the philanthropy sector to tribal communities, and it is woefully small. When you look at the entire scope of giving in the range of 100 billion annually, the tribal nations and indigenous communities get less than 0.5%. So looking at those numbers, we're trying to increase it significantly, and also reach out to tribes so that they can identify the needs and priorities and where those resources can do the most benefit with our communities and our tribal people. So that's what these listening sessions are for. We are getting a lot of excellent insight, feedback, data that will be comprised in a report after all of our listening sessions. And this will really drive the programming and discussion with the foundations in the philanthropy sector, so that tribal nations can drive where these resources will be invested in tribal communities. So it's this hasn't been done before. So I appreciate all of our panelists, our tribal leaders, our staff, and those in attendance here today and in the past listening sessions are really going to help us accomplish that goal of increasing those those resources flowing to tribal communities, and doing it in the right way, driven by our priorities. And to do that, in addition to this discussion here today, we're going to have a survey, and I believe our staff at Native Americans in Philanthropy, Kelsey Woody, just dropped it in the chat. Appreciate that. And so if you could fill out that survey, we're going to be asking a lot of the questions that we'll be putting to the panelists. And so that feedback from yourself is going to help identify what the priorities and needs are of your individual communities to help us accomplish that goal of really directing and increasing resources from these foundations. In addition to the survey, well, actually to incentivize the survey, excuse me, we're offering a small gift, $100 gift card for those who will enter into a drawing, and for those who fill out the survey will be eligible for that gift. So appreciate everybody to fill out that survey. That is going to be key when we compile the report after all the listening sessions. Next, I'd like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, who they are, where they come from, before we get into the questions and answer period. First, Kelsey Scares the Hawk, from the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Scares the Hawk. I am enrolled in the Cheyenne River and Standing Rock Lakota tribes in South Dakota. I am the charitable giving specialist for the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community. I have worked for SMSC going on 8 years now, and I've been in this current role only since last April.
Thank you, Kelsey. I'm glad you can be here. Next, we have Chief Ben Barnes from the Shawnee tribe.
I'm Ben Barnes. I'm chief at the Shawnee tribe. I'm also a member of our tribe's religious community, where we still practice our ancient religion at a little place in Oklahoma, White Oak, Oklahoma. While our headquarters, our offices are in Oklahoma, we have historic interests in more than 20 states, mostly around the Ohio River Valley. So I appreciate being asked to be here today, and thank you very much. Thanks, Joel.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Chief Ben Barnes. Next, we have Dr. Aaron Payment.
Ani, bonjour. I'm Aaron Payment. I'm recently recovering tribal chairperson. I resigned my position recently, and my plan is to focus on education, addressing the issue of education, Indian education, and also protection of our Mother Earth. So those are my commitments. I had previously leadership roles with the National Congress of American Indians, Midwest Alliance of Sovereign Tribes, and United Tribes of Michigan. And in my adult life, I went back to school. I'm a high school dropout, but I went back to school and picked up a bachelor's degree, 3 master's degrees, and a doctorate degree, all for the purpose of trying to find answers to be able to bring my skills to bear for the benefit of Indian country. Miigwech.
Thank you, Dr. Payment, and for all our panelists for being here today. This is really an honor to have such a distinguished panel to talk about this issue and really dive deeper into how philanthropy is connecting with tribal communities and tribal governments, how we can do more in order to increase those resources and build those relationships and trust between tribes and foundations. And so to begin that discussion, I'd like to ask the first question for Chief Barnes. Your tribe's history tells an interesting story about your people's original homelands and where your tribe resides today. Can you share a little about this? And given that history, what are the unique needs of your communities in these two areas? Oh, you're on mute again, Chief.
Thanks. The Shawnee people are removed people. We came to Oklahoma very late. And so our experience is one of migration, forced removal, voluntary removal, moving westward after pressures of westward expansion. So we have an obligation to in our old homelands where our villages are still at, and where our cemeteries where we buried our dead, those places still exist. But there's also sacred sites back east. Some of the mound groups, some of the most interesting things archaeologically in the United States are in the Ohio River Valley. There are these effigy mounds as well as geometric mounds where people were measuring out the seasons, measuring out the cosmos, and watching being able to measure the time and the years passing just by building these earthworks upon the terrain. So we advocate for those places. We believe that those places have inherent human rights as well. They're beings just like us. And it's from that framework of understanding ourselves as, even while we have been removed, most of our population lives in diaspora. And so we serve a diasporic community. And so when we look at fundraising or we look at participating, we started having those conversations. How do we create our nonprofits? Because we have to do so much work in such a vast area, more than 20 eastern states. And so rather than recreate 501c3s across with each Secretary of State and every state capital, we created tribal code. We have the ability to have our own laws. And as one of the 3 sovereigns mentioned in the Constitution, our courts can create corporate law that governs the creations of for-profit and non-for-profit corporations. And it was with that in mind that we started creating our the corporate code, and this particularly the nonprofit corporate code for the tribe, so that the tribe could do this type of work. Because at the end of the day, my job as chief is to undo the effects of our removal. It's to undo the effects of boarding schools. It's to strengthen our communities. It's to reverse the loss of languages. The United States made a 182-year effort to extinguish Shawnee language. They failed. We have what amounts to 4% of the population of the Shawnees are now enrolled in language classes of some kind. But we know that this is, after 182 years of effort, that's a lot of federal effort and a lot of federal resources that were deployed to stamp out our language. So for us, we need to create a vehicle that can step in and fill those voids for language and cultural preservation and strengthening communities. So it's kind of a long answer to a seemingly short question. Thank you, Joel.
Appreciate that Chief, and you know that is a unique situation, but a lot of tribes share that story of removal, and I believe we talked about it a couple days ago, but I appreciate you know your tribe and others who reside in Oklahoma who have taken care of some of our people and lands. Nez Perce was also placed in Oklahoma over 150 years ago, and we were fortunate enough to go back and restore our homelands back in Idaho and the Pacific Northwest. But you know your story of reconnecting and restoring your original homelands is an important one that I think can highlight how philanthropy and foundations can help accomplish those goals. And to follow up on that question, how have you engaged philanthropy and foundations, and what, if any, barriers have you experienced? Where do you feel philanthropy could best support the Shawnee tribe and your programs and initiative?
You know, I've been thinking about that question ever since, you know, you first asked us to ponder these questions. And I think one of the real challenges is for Shawnee people and tribal nations is that getting people that have participated in philanthropy for a long time, decades, to understand that there's still a lot more to learn about philanthropy and about Native philanthropy and how it works in our communities and about tribal nations. We're not, you know, a 501c3. We're not an endowment fund. You know, this is a government. And so, you know, governments have government needs, and there will always be things where philanthropy is necessary to fill the gap in those government shortfalls, because so many of our programs are funded by, you know, federal dollars, and those federal dollars oftentimes fall short. Language is one that always falls far too short. And so I think what can be helpful is it's not just the dollars. Sometimes it is sharing that spotlight. We had an example where we're working with a national partner, and we was getting ready to launch a $15 million foundation. And it was the spotlight that they was able to share that had the real value, because it was going to bring national attention to this endeavor. So unfortunately, we had the state historic preservation officer actually was passed away during the middle of this process, and we had to delay this announcement. That's where we're headed, is trying to partner up with larger philanthropic organizations that have large spotlights that can share that stage, share that megaphone with indigenous communities, because those indigenous communities may not have access to that loud of a voice, or to be able to get as many people to hear the call to act. So that's my sense of it from my Shawnee perspective, Joel.
I appreciate that. Have you has there been any resistance or any barriers that have prevented you from making those connections and building those relationships and partnerships with foundations?
You know, the obstacles I've came across have been largely just an education one, where folks don't realize what we are. They don't realize the nature of the tribal government is wholly different from an NGO, non-governmental organization, or some other structure of a 501c organization. They don't recognize that there's really distinct differences in tribal nations as opposed to a non-governmental organization or traditional nonprofits.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your insights. And I believe one of our vice presidents here at Native Americans in Philanthropy just posted in the chat some of the great work that you're doing with regards to the boarding school commission, and really shining a light on that true and bringing the truth out, and trying to get some restoration and some healing for our people. And so appreciate your efforts in that initiative as well. So it's incredibly important work.
Thank you.
Next we have Dr. Aaron Payment. But before I ask you a question, Doctor, I'd like to plug the survey again. So it's in the chat. The link is in the chat. We really want to get the perspective from all the tribal nations that are on the Zoom call today, in order to ensure that we understand the priorities from all the different regions and all the different tribes, and the needs out there. So thank you for filling it out. And next we have a question for Dr. Aaron Payment. Chief Barnes touched on this regarding federal funding. We know tribes often rely on federal and our tribal hard dollars to support our programs and services. What ways have you seen philanthropy support tribal nations' programs and initiatives? How have you engaged philanthropy, and what, if any, barriers have you experienced?
All right. So earlier, when I introduced myself, part of the introduction was Makwa, Magizi, and Odom. So my clans are Makwa, which is bear, and Magizi, and the Magizi is the seeing things at the broader scope. Makwa is the defense right at this level here. And so I'm going to go back and forth. And so just some preparatory statements is it's important to note that the treaty and trust obligation is currently only being met pennies on the dollar. And so this is a message that I think givers would need to understand why our need is so great. We ceded over 500 million acres of land to the federal government in exchange for health, education, and social welfare into perpetuity. So any of the funding that we get is not based on reparations or even really based on the poor economics of our community. They're obligated per the treaties. Also, if you look up the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Broken Promises report, we still have the worst of the worst statistical outcomes in terms of suicide, alcoholism, drug addiction, lowest education attainment, unemployment. And those are persisting, and they're explained by tribal critical race theory, which is the cyclical loss of land, loss of opportunity. And tribes are only now getting the resources to be able to build back and to emerge out of hundreds of years of forced assimilation and removal. Also, there's a misnomer that because we have casinos that all of a sudden we don't have any need. And it's important to note that only about 40% of the tribes have casinos. And that means about 60% do not. And a few tribes do per capita, and most of the tribes that do a per capita, which is a revenue share from the casino net revenues, it's very nominal. And so it's not life-changing. It's not like you don't have to work. There's a very few that actually have those kind of economics. And so it's important to know that profile of Indian country to realize just how great our need is. My tribe contributes 100% of our net revenues for services. We supplement the federal government's failure to fully fund the treaty and trust obligation, and we're only scratching the surface of our need. And so in my community, I'm 56 years old. We were recognized in 1972 when I was 7 years old. And we were very, very poor and destitute in my community. We didn't have indoor plumbing. There were church groups in the 1970s that donated truckloads, semi-truckloads full of clothing. And then our grandmothers would organize over at the local church to put them all in like age categories. And then we'd get to go pick clothes out. And for us, that was a luxury because we normally didn't get new clothes for school. But just knowing that at the beginning, even before we were recognized, we had that kind of philanthropy that benefited our communities. Also, before we were recognized, our community leaders put on Christmas parties. They did fundraising, and they bought presents for us so that we would be able to go and get presents. And some of our families, that was the only present that we got. While I was in college, I was a volunteer for a Native student organization. We did a Trail of Tears walkathon, and I ran 30 miles, and we raised funds for a local camp that helped tribal kids. Also, I helped coordinate our annual pole sit for the March of Dimes, and I was the Hands Across America coordinator back in 1986 for the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so in my community, philanthropy is a very strong cultural value in helping one another and giving back. When I became chairman, I helped to do some fundraising directly. In the 14 years that I was chair, I personally donated over $30,000 in Christmas presents and raised over almost $200,000 total. Also, scholarship is important for us to help us break the cycle of poverty. And I've donated over 10,000, but I've helped raise over 1.5 million in scholarships for our community. And so we have a ethic in our organization to do community service. We also have dress down funds that our team members donate. So then if you happen to have need, but you're just above the income guidelines of the federal funding, we can still help people. And so earlier, the chief mentioned about some of the restrictions of federal guidelines and poverty rates. You know, sometimes you can go up to 150% of poverty, which is kind of liberal, but need doesn't know boundaries. And so sometimes people that are working poor might make just over the 150% of poverty, and they have great need. And so we still have that ethic in our community, but we do need help. So some of the barriers that we face is that corporate donors have this misperception that all economic needs are met because of casinos, and that is a complete misnomer. Our need is great in Indian country, and again, the evidence of that is the Broken Promises report. You can see the economic conditions that some of our tribes are still in. There's generally an idea that you have to have a 501c3 in order for a donation to be legitimate, and that's also a misnomer. We're governments, and so we can receive those funds, but tribes need help in structuring the receipt of our corporate giving. And so, you know, sometimes companies want to donate where they can get a tax benefit. And so that's a win-win. I think it's a good thing. And sometimes when you donate directly to a tribe, if they don't see the tax benefit, then they might choose another donation. And so helping us to set up that structure so that they get whatever benefit taxation-wise by donating to a tribe is something that we need. We also need we need help in building capacity to develop our infrastructure for giving and donating. And so sustainable infrastructure for how to structure that. Shakopee's on and they have some amazing things to say. They're really my heroes. They're the gold standard for giving. And they have that sustainable structure. And so not all of us have that though. And so sharing best practices among tribes is something that I think would really help. Also, we need assistance in identifying our need, and so that we can show more clearly to corporate donors what our need is to get past that misnomer casinos, but helping us to identify what that need looks like so that we can justify and show that need is still there and it's great. Marketing ourselves is sometimes when you're talking about charity, marketing is a necessary part of fundraising. A lot of people don't understand that. There's a built-in inherence culturally to marketing and becoming showy, but we do need help with that. And any assistance that we can get to help us to create sustainable infrastructure for receiving contributions and also for reaching back and helping others is something that we would appreciate. Miigwech.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. I appreciate all your insights, and you know, I know you're in a transition off of tribal council, but your wealth of knowledge is vast, and I appreciate you being here with us today to share some of that with our fellow panelists as well as those on the line. And this is going to be recorded. I think there was a question in the chat, so we're recording this conversation in order to have this available for folks who couldn't make it today, as well as other tribes from across the Indian country to help benefit from just what you talked about, sharing our story, our best practices, some of the pitfalls, some of the challenges that we've all encountered, and some of the ways that we've resolved and solved those situations to really educate those in the philanthropy world about tribes, and that's exactly what these listening sessions are for. And so I really appreciate all your insights, Dr. Payment. And for those in attendance, if you have any questions, I know that you've posted some in the chat, but keep posting them, please. Not just questions for our staff, which I believe a lot of our staff, including our CEO, have been answering those questions. So I really appreciate those. But if you have any additional questions for our panelists, please put that in the chat as well. And after our questions, then we'll get to yours. So next we have Kelsey Scares the Hawk. A couple questions for you. And Aaron mentioned, that Shakopee is a shining star in this space, and you are, and I appreciate you being here on this panel today to share the story. I know it's difficult sometimes for tribes and tribal members and leaders to really toot our own horn. And, we're humble people, but really, yeah, we need to shine a light on those stars like Shakopee and other tribes that we have in the past at our listening sessions to highlight how our tribes are really leaders in this space, in this philanthropy space, and we are givers. We are very generous, and so the question is, the Shakopee, Mdewakanton, and Sioux community has helped so many worthy causes. Please share your tribe's approach and processes to your philanthropic work. Can you share an example of a project or an initiative that your tribe supported that you're particularly proud of?
Okay. Hello. So the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community has donated over $350 million since around 1992 when the casino broke ground. Even before Mystic Lake Casino was built, they were still doing little bits of monetary donations even before Little Six, and it was just a bingo hall. So little bits of donations here and there. I found that fascinating, just kind of going through the tribal records when I started this position to see the progression that Shakopee has made in their contributional donations. So how donations work for Shakopee is that we actually have 3 different forms of giving. So kind of going into it, our first one is our employee outreach program. And this is a local kind of based program where our employees and team members can volunteer to work at local organizations, whether it's in forms of doing supply drives or volunteering directly with the organizations. And one of the things that we're doing tomorrow is we're actually doing a food distribution for people in our county. So that's one distinct form. The second form is our community member outreach program that we just launched. It's the Dakota Kinship Program. This is an outreach program we created specifically for community members from Shakopee to volunteer at organizations, specifically the Native organizations who receive funding from Shakopee. That was one of the critical points that we had seen in feedback, was that community members wanted to work directly with more Native organizations, hence the creation of that program. And then leading into what Dr. Aaron was talking about, our donations and grants. Like I said, SMSC has donated over $350 million over the years, and that is across the nation. So we're not only donating only to Minnesota, and that goes to organizations, tribes across the state, region, and country. And Shakopee is listed as one of the top charitable givers in Minnesota and Indian country as a whole. So Shakopee is very fortunate that once the Mystic Lake Casino got built and the success from the casino, that they have been able to create this charitable giving program and give back to Indian country and give back to the local and surrounding areas. So our donations is not only monetary funds, it's also in the form of non-cash items, which is more locally based. So that includes like golf packages, hotel stays, bingo packages, water, and like AEDs, so automatic emergency defibrillators. And we know those ones are kind of spendy. And actually, that is one of, I just got a batch of AEDs on Monday that we are sending out to the Cowlitz Indian tribe in Washington. So that is pretty cool. And then any organization is eligible to apply for donations, monetary or non-cash. And as Dr. Aaron mentioned, like there's that myth that you have to be a 501c3. You don't have to be a 501c3 to apply for funding. And then we also have our grants program. And so our grants is given to mainly organized tribal governments at this moment right now. That is one thing that we kind of fixed when I came on board. If you've been to our website, shakopee-dakota.org, under charitable giving, and then we actually have a new portal system that launched where everything is a little bit more automated, and we included a bit more questions in the funding process. And so with this process, we actually were able to create protections for tribal governments themselves. So if you are an organization and you are located within the boundaries of a reservation, you are required to request a tribal resolution from that government. And if you do not get that tribal resolution, you are not allowed to request funding from Shakopee. If you get the approval, great, then we will move forward with it. But that was a protection we created in place. And once I had met with some of the tribes and told them about that, they were very grateful because they don't know who is requesting funding and saying that it's benefiting the people on the reservation, and it actually is not. And within Indian country, we all see it. We see it every day. These organizations are raising funds and doing supply drives that are going to benefit people on reservations, and we find out it never made it there. So that is, I guess, that is one benefit of having this new online portal. And so some of the projects and initiatives, I'm fairly new to this role, so I don't know the whole 20-year history, 20, 30 plus year history of donations. But since I've been on board, we've done several large contributions that I am very interested in, very proud of. One of them that launched is called Understand Native Minnesota. It is a $5 million campaign that launched in October of 2019. It is a campaign that is focused on changing the Native American narrative that is taught in Minnesota schools. And so it launched in October 2019, COVID hit. So it took like a 2-year hiatus, and we actually just kind of relaunched it last fall, going really hard into it this year. And with that, that made Shakopee increase its presence at certain events. And that means that, so Shakopee, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Minnesota Get Together, Great Minnesota Get Together, the Minnesota State Fair. It is the second largest state fair in the country. We're behind Texas. So Shakopee actually got a booth there last year. We're the first tribal nation represented at the state fair. So in Minnesota, there are 11 tribes. So in the entire history of the Minnesota State Fair, Shakopee is the first one to ever be represented at the state fair. And we are continuing that representation this year and renewing our booth. So we're just gearing up to get ready to launch that again as well. Another campaign that we launched, or another charitable contribution we did at the Minnesota Zoo, it's called the Treetop Trail Campaign. They have an old monorail system that they are converting into like a walkway, so you can walk above the locations and see the animals. And so SMSC contributed $1.5 million to that to have a say in the buffalo pasture, so that we are helping include Dakota people and helping care for the buffalo that will be there as well. And so those are some of the larger ones. And so for me personally, it's more of the hands-on smaller contributions that we really don't see, but it's the ones that I see personally that make a difference on somebody's face. So one of them was last year at our powwow at our Wachipi in August, we handed out backpacks. We handed out 850 backpacks only because I ran out of backpacks to any Native child or any child that needed school supplies. And so they could come from Canada, they could come from all over, you could follow the powwow trail, and any kid that came up, you got a free backpack. And so we're actually continuing that this year, and we're gonna try and give away 2,000 bags this year, just because of the great and wonderful feedback that we got from it. And so it's we've got the largest, we can do large charitable contributions and then small ones that you can just see personally on their face that it made them happy.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. Yeah, that really puts a smile on my face. I could just imagine, all the happy kids and families when they receive important gifts and resources like that that'll help them throughout the school year. And that's a really great initiative, correcting some of that misinformation in our schools, and funding that re-education, telling the true story of Shakopee and other tribes within the region, and the culture and the history and the contributions they've made throughout the life of the state of Minnesota, which that's a constant education that we do across the country, and trying to tell inform them that we've been here long before statehood and the creation of the United States, and that we still are here, present, and contributing to the country and to the state. It's funny you mentioned the state fair, because I went to high school in Minneapolis, so I've been to that big giant state fair multiple times, and wow, that's a shock to hear that Shakopee is the first tribe to have a presence there. So I really want applaud you for doing that and for elevating tribal voices at that level with the general population. This the next question that I wanted to ask is, how do we build upon all that good work that Shakopee and other tribes are doing in this space? What opportunities do you see in growing the tribal impacts in philanthropy? And what do you see is needed to support and elevate that tribal philanthropic work?
Yeah, so this one I had to think about quite a bit, but then while Dr. Aaron was talking, he said some words and it kind of pinged with me. One of the things that stood out was we need assistance in developing our need. And so that is one thing that I see quite a bit within our applications. And I guess that is a huge part. Like we have, like I said, any organization can apply for funding for us. But when it comes down to that question, like, okay, what do you need? It's always kind of met with the Blake stare. Like, I don't think anybody really has ever asked, especially Native organizations, what do you need versus what do you want? And those are two different questions. Like, I want this and this and this, but we actually need this and this and this. So I guess that would be a huge process within all of tribal nations and Native organizations, is, I guess, the help in applying for all this funding. Because like NAP says, like less than 1% is given to Native American organizations. And it's not like I don't think Native organizations don't know the funding is out there. I think it's the lack of the help of knowing how to apply for the funding. And for me, I know we've added a lot more questions to our application process, but I'm willing to take a phone call. I will walk through an application with you. With our new portal system, I can log in as the user and I can see where they're stumped, and then kind of re-explain a question, or just say, hey, I will tell them literally what to write, like, hey, put this in your sentence. And I guess it's if that makes sense.
No, it does, Kelsey. And I think that story has also been told across the other regions, the other listening sessions that we've conducted, that tribes are used to like federal funding and that whole grant process, but they're already at max capacity with their staff and their programs in order to apply for those funds and then to report on those funds. And so this new world of philanthropy and the resources that potentially could flow, not only do they have to get used to individual foundations in their processes, because it's every foundation is different. But then you also have their staff who are maxed out with their capacity in order to apply for these funds. So we've definitely heard that loud and clear, that some technical assistance for tribes is needed in order for them to take advantage of these resources. And one thing I wanted to also build upon your comments regarding ensuring that these resources get to tribes and tribal communities, and that they are being utilized in the manner that that these communities want. And so I really appreciate you educating us on what Shakopee has done with their giving program in order to require outside, non-tribal nonprofits and organizations who are going after philanthropic funds from Shakopee to state that they have reached out and gotten the blessing from the tribe that they're working in their homelands. That's a big step, and so that's more that's great to share with the tribes who are on this call, and it's going to be shared nationally, because I think that's an important step in order to ensure that we are respected, because we're talking about, we're always talking about consultation and with the federal government and state governments. The same thing needs to happen in this other non-governmental philanthropic world, that we need to ensure that they're talking directly with the tribes and the tribal communities that they're serving. So I appreciate you taking that important step to protect yourself, but also all the other tribal communities, so that the resources get to where they're needed. Aaron, Dr. Payment, I'm wondering if you could provide some insight into, you mentioned the history of Sault Ste. Marie going back in your charitable giving, way before the development of businesses and casinos, and just that generosity and giving spirit is within the blood of Sault Ste. Marie people, and I think that's evident across Indian country that we are generous and giving people, and this has always been a part of us. Going forward, is there anything that excites you going forward as far as opportunities for the tribe to expand the work within philanthropy, be it from tribal funds or also from partnerships with foundations and their resources?
Yeah. Yep. So first I'll say that growing up in poverty, I'm always going to have a needs-based focus first. But too often the limitations of federal funding really doesn't transcend our basic needs, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs of housing, food, and shelter. And we only scratch the surface of those needs. And so, reaching out and developing relationships with corporate givers to help us to meet additional needs, and some of those are transcending the lower level basic needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's difficult to focus on higher level values like land preservation, natural resources when you are, when you're homeless. And so, focusing on and trying to build some support on higher level needs and traditional values, because it actually brings us back to where we came from. But I would also say that there's some seed monies to be able to kickstart or help tribes structure the economic development in creating those structures, but those are really limited. And so there's need there if there's giving that is interested, and also partnering. The other thing to keep in mind is there's assets that tribes have in partnering with corporations in terms of land that's not taxable. And so there might be partnerships that could be had seed money to fund higher level Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like protection of our Mother Earth and our waters, helping reframe and re-embrace our traditional values of protecting our natural resources. Again, when you're focused on meeting the basic needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have to prioritize that, and not often enough do we get to focus on protecting our natural resources. Land acquisition is a really big one. My tribe is, as an example, Bay Mills, our brother sister tribe. Brian Newland is was our former president of the Bay Mills tribe. They're about 6% of my tribe's population, and they have multiples more land than we do because of the timing of when they were recognized and when they were able to retain their land. My tribe only has 3,000 acres of land. We are the largest tribe east of the Mississippi, and we only have 3,000 acres of land. And so when you have limited land, you have to prioritize the use of that land, and obviously development for housing, travel centers. And so we don't ever get to the next level, which is protecting the natural resource. Funds for land conservancy, for either acquiring land and then dedicating that land to be protected. I serve on the President's 30 by 30 ad hoc tribal advisory, and to help meet the president, meet those aspirations, we have to focus on expediting land and trust, and also protecting those lands and mitigating land. So if we get a donation of land and we need to mitigate acquiring additional lands and expediting that process of having that to be protected land, that's a very cumbersome and bureaucratic process, and there's some efficiencies I think would help there. And bringing to light that need would be something that we could really benefit from. And then just finally helping us, and I said it already, and Chakabi even mentioned it, was helping us to create the giving and receiving infrastructure within our respective tribes, and how to tap into corporate donors and legitimizing that process, and corporate donors helping other corporate donors to understand that our need is great, and that we are legitimate, and that we are a good investment.
Katsiaya, thank you, Dr. Payment. And I appreciate you talking about taking care of our people and our needs first, but in it, core to that, and it's all intertwined, is the land, right? Are the resources that we've depended on for thousands of years. So it goes to that preservation of our people, of our culture, of our way of life. And so that's that story I've not heard before, Aaron, with regards to Sault Ste. Marie, and the fact that you guys have 3,000 acres, but your population of your membership, of your citizens, is so huge. And so taking care of them first, and now looking at the next steps and the next level in order to regain your homelands, regain your resources, protect those first foods, and the ecosystems they depend on is really important. And I think Chief Barnes, you're still with us, and if you are, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about restoration in respect to the Shawnee tribe. And you talked about being forcibly removed and now residing in Oklahoma. What are the efforts to restore your homelands and your historical territory? And how could you see philanthropy really helping accomplish those goals in order to reconnect and restore your lands?
Well, we've and it doesn't necessarily have to be like large scale philanthropy. We had a couple, and these two men, they don't have any children, and so they wanted to make a bequest to us of some property in southern Indiana. And at the time, we were looking for land in southern Indiana as a NAGPRA burial ground, so we could reinter ancestors from universities. And so Providence provided, these two gentlemen stepped up. But that's just one example. And just recently we acquired 340 acres of pristine wilderness inside the Daniel Boone inside of Kentucky. And so for us, there is a village there, a historic village there, as well as some burials and some other archaeological resources. And it was going to bulldoze the landscape and put some McMansions on top of it because of the view shed it had was gorgeous. So we acquired that to keep it from for having that landscape, soiled and sullied. Here it is inside the Daniel Boone National Forest, gorgeous terrain. It was going to put up these, god awful McMansions on the top of the bluff. So that's some of the ways that we've done reestablishing homeland. For us, we have our Axis Mundi, we have a center of the world for Shawnee people. And, that moved with us and we carried it with us to Oklahoma. So that place will still be here because that's where our religious community is. But reconnecting back to our homelands is, there's no one that's going to speak up for our sacred sites like we do. There's no one that can offer the contextualization of our sacred sites like we do. So whenever the Shawnee go to visit the Serpent Mound in Peebles, Ohio, we have a different understanding of that place. That place is a cathedral. While it may be made out of soil, it is most definitely a sacred place. It is a traditional cultural property for Shawnee. And just because we left that place doesn't mean that it's not sacred to us. Just because we left those places does not mean that those areas still in our homelands. So we do participate in trying to not just reacquire homelands, but also step back into homelands and be advocates for those places, especially in regards to what we believe is those sites have inherent human rights.
Thank you, Chief, for that. Hey, before you turn off your camera, I got another question from actually our Vice President Greg Maston, asking about the boarding school impacts, and you mentioned a possible new foundation to help address that issue. Can you share a little bit more information about that exciting foundation?
Yeah, we were working with I'll go ahead and say it, National Trust for Historic Preservation, and we were going to be designated one of the 11th most endangered sites. And so we were really excited about that. We thought, okay, we can use this to propel our new foundation. And we was going to announce that foundation. The creation of the foundation was make that $15 million promise to create these places into monuments of our survival, to strengthen our communities, and to try to undo what 182 years of boarding school experience for Shawnee people. Try to undo that effect, which means, getting language to the youngest possible community members, getting them fluent in Shawnee at the same time they acquire English. That's the mission. Strengthening our communities. So many of our people were told, don't speak your language. You're not going to need that. That language only brings you harm. Don't worship like that. Don't worship like your grandma and grandpa, because that kind of worship only brought them harm. So there's generations of that. That's that intergenerational damage that's happened to our communities, where people stepped away from culture, stepped away from tradition, stepped away from their traditional religion and their languages. So the foundation that we're going to launch was going to be to reverse those effects. All of that fell through because the state historic preservation officer for Kansas, she suddenly died like with 2 or 3 days left before the announcement of the 11 most by National Trust. So we decided it would probably be best that we did not try to launch that new foundation with with that hanging over the whole celebration. But we're still partnered with National Trust to find another way to uplift the properties and to get the attention. But so these are ongoing dialogues still, but we would welcome any other national partner to help us elevate this conversation in some way, so that we could get the attention to our cause, because we believe that boarding schools need to be talked about now. Our removal needs to be talked about now. These are all symptoms of the same disease. So that's what we're doing. And I do have to run. I got to get into another meeting here. We're at the top of the hour.
All right. Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate all your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you all.
All right. That's such important work. And to undo some of that damage that's been caused over so many years. And we're still feeling it today, as we talked about. And so, yeah, that's what we do here at Native Americans of Philanthropy, is try to find those connections, those resources with foundations in the philanthropy world who could help support initiatives and causes, just as that was just mentioned by Chief Barnes. So and we're going to, as I mentioned, gather all this data that we've been listening to the panelists, as well as those who have filled out the survey. So I want to encourage everyone to click on that link in the survey, get your responses in, and be eligible for that gift card. But really, we need that. We need the stories. We need your data on what the priorities and the needs are for your individual tribes and communities, so that we can ensure that these resources are plugged into the right areas and doing what tribal nations and tribal communities would like them to do. We have a couple more minutes here left before we're going to start winding down, but wanting to open up the floor if there's any other questions from our attendees. I think there was a question regarding Canadian First Nations. I don't know if any of our staff here at Native Americans in Philanthropy saw that question in the chat, but talking about the needs of all of our Indigenous brothers and sisters here on the North American continent. I've been with Native Americans in Philanthropy for about 6 months now. We are a national organization. We've been working strictly with tribes and tribal communities here in the United States. But I wanted to pose that question to the rest of our team about potential collaboration and partnerships with First Nations and other Indigenous communities in North America. Specifically.
Yeah. Hi, Joel. I can step in real quick. Oh, actually, I see Dr. Payment's hand up. Do you want to go first, Dr. Payment? I'll defer you.
Just real quick. So we're right on the border of Canada, and part of my blood is Garden River First Nations and Thessalan Band in Canada, and several of my nephews and nieces live over in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and so I know that this initiative focus is on tribes in the United States, but I think when we talk about that flexibility, our programs and services for federal funding, we can only serve members of our federally recognized tribes. We can see tribal people from other tribes at our health center. At IHS centers, you have to articulate that process. But there are needs that transcend the border. And like I just said, my brother's children were raised in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and they often have need. And so helping how to extend, well, actually, I think the answer is self-evident. In the fundraising or philanthropy that we do, we have greater flexibility than federal funds to be able to structure how beneficiaries that are not limited by that border. That border was forced on us. We didn't have any say in it. And so we are, we are part of the First Nations on the border, and this would extend also to the southern border. Over now.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. Greg Maston, our Vice President for Tribal Nations, wanted to respond.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Payment. And I'm actually the opposite of the situation this gentleman is referring to, because I'm from the United States. My tribe is from California, but I live in Canada. I live in southern British Columbia. So I was just going to say it is a bit trickier for the person who's posed the question. It really is on a case-by-case basis. We do work with some foundations where they do fund international initiatives. So I would say it's definitely possible. I think some of them probably would be limited to just the United States. So you just really have to kind of do a little bit of research and just, and I think it's a fair question to ask them if they are willing to fund internationally, because there certainly are foundations out there that would do that. But I would say, not all of them can do that. So. And I think there's another question here too, Joel. I could just go ahead and jump in, and it's asking if we provide technical assistance. So this is where some of this is going, and why we're doing these listening sessions is really just to get a better sense of what is really happening in our Native communities out there. And we definitely are hearing this across the board. So this is why this information is so important, because it will help us to kind of build out programs to support that. So we definitely are talking about different forms of technical support. whether that will be like an online portal or we can do webinars. There are also other organizations out there that do amazing work in helping Native communities. So we work with all the different Native serving organizations out there as well. So after the listening session, we're going to really evaluate all of this input that we've received and then start to develop some of the programs to support this. So the short answer is yes, we will provide different forms of technical support, or at least help to amplify other forms out there that other organizations are doing. We aren't currently doing it, but I would say within the next 4 to 6 months, you'll see more systems of support from NAP after we complete the listening sessions. And not to steal my own thunder, but I'll talk a little bit later about our Tribal Philanthropy Coalition. So this is a group that is already meeting right now, and this is made up of tribal grant makers and tribal grant seekers. So we heard from Shakopee earlier, they're a part of that group. We have others in there like Tulalip tribes, San Manuel. There's different tribes in there that have giving programs that we're meeting monthly and really talking about how can we work together? How can we collaborate? How can we learn from each other? Are there things that we can, standardize or have common definitions? And then are there ways, down the road that we can even partner with philanthropy in general? And we have meetings like this all the time with the philanthropy sector. So I can say that the philanthropy sector, they do want to support and engage our Native communities, and we're just trying to find the best ways to do that. We don't want them to just take kind of their standard philanthropic approach and then try and somehow make that fit our Native communities. We have a different history, we have different unique needs, and so we have different processes. And as Chief Barnes mentioned earlier, they are tribal governments as well. So we're trying to make sure that when these connections are made, they're made in the right way. And so that's what that's really about. And I'm going to go ahead and post some language real quick here in the chat too, that we just put together that kind of answers that question earlier about giving to tribes. So there is a designation called 7871. And I'll just post that real quick. So I'll pause there, Joel, and I'll flip it back to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Greg. And I think Dr. Payment, you got your hand up.
No, that was from before, but I did drop a chat in. Really, just some basic needs is to help build capacity. If we can think about everything else everybody's already doing when they're running a tribal organization and running a government. And some of our tribes are small and in rural communities. And so being able to attract or retain your own people to serve in this capacity is a real challenge. Once you get a degree, you can pick where you want to go, and not everybody wants to stay close to home. And so helping tribes to build capacity for being competitive to write grant applications or know how to reach out to and make that initial step to a philanthropic organization, I think is a real need, especially for Alaska Native villages.
Thank you. I appreciate you emphasizing that. As you know, we have over 570 tribes, and so we have very, very different circumstances, rural, urban, the size. You talked about your land base, and so we always have to be mindful of some of the more remote tribes, especially you mentioned Alaska, and there's so many villages up there. And the fact that they need some basic technical assistance in order to be to apply and to be involved in these funding agreements with foundations. I think I'd just like to provide some time for any closing comments from Kelsey or Dr. Payment. Right now, Chief Barnes had to leave us, but are there any closing comments, Kelsey, that you'd like to make?
No, but since you guys all have the link for the Shakopee charitable giving, I expect an application.
Oh yeah, I think you're gonna get a lot more applications. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for being here and sharing sharing your story. and really providing us with a lot of useful information for us to broaden our participation in this philanthropy world. Appreciate it. Dr. Payment, any closing comments?
Yeah, so first, thank you for inviting me. Sometimes when we leave Tribal Office, we become a pariah, but I'm still vital. I still have lots of contributions to make, and I'm trying to figure out what that next step is, but it seems like with my education, I'll find some opportunity. But I wanted just to say that I really appreciate this outreach, because one of the traditional values that I've heard over my life is the honor of one is the honor of all. And when we help each other and reach out and help build capacity in each other and share information and resources, then we are all better off. You know, it's a lonely environment if you succeed and you look around you and other people are not succeeding. And so it really is our traditional value to bring people up with us. And so I appreciate this work that you're doing. Miigwech.
Grazie. Thank you, Dr. Payment, for your years and years of service to your tribe, to Indian country. And like I told you personally, you know, you're going to be a warrior for your tribe in Indian country for years and years and decades to come. And like you said, yeah, you have that knowledge, and thank you for sharing it, because it's that is a core traditional teaching amongst all of our tribes is we don't keep that to ourselves, right? We share that gift and we lift other people up. So really appreciate you being here today and providing that for us. Next, I'd like to hand it over to Greg Masson, our Vice President for Tribal Nations Initiative, and to close us out and to make some really exciting announcements.
Thank you, Joel, and you know, just a fantastic job once again. Thank you for moderating today, and thank you to our panelists, to Kelsey for being here, and to Dr. Aaron Payment. And I have to say, Dr. Payment, you just make me smile every time I look at you. I just feel empowered. So, so thank you so much for participating today and sharing with us your great thoughts. So for those of you that don't know me, so my name is Greg Maston. I'm a member of the Yurok tribe, which is based in Northern California. I'm also a descendant of the Hupa and the Karuk peoples. And so I currently serve as the Vice President of Tribal Nations Engagement and Special Projects here at Native Americans in Philanthropy. And I'm just so thrilled with the session today. Each time I learn more about our, you know, the unique needs of our different communities and our regions. And this is why we wanted to do this one. Eric Stegman and myself first sat down and we really started talking about, you know, we want to move that dial, we want to move that needle and get more funding to our tribal communities. We both agreed there needs to be better connection with our tribal nations. And so the first thing was that we got to get out and we got to talk to our tribes and we got to hear from them, hear from their communities and what are their unique needs. And so this is why we're doing this, so we can better quantify, and then that helps us to better advocate too, and to be more strategic about it. So right now, what I've seen out there, there's definitely a desire to want to support Indian country, but just needs to be better education and understanding about how to do that. And this is why, you know, that survey is so important that Joel has been mentioning throughout. So if you haven't filled it out yet, I'll just ask you one more time to please make sure you fill out the survey so that we can understand what the needs are of your community. And it's really for a couple of reasons. One, we want to learn more about the projects out there, because I will tell you, we get calls all the time from funders that want to support different initiatives, and some of them are, you know, regional, and some of them have specific initiatives. So it is nice to know what are the projects out there, so we can kind of connect people. But also in the bigger picture, we definitely want to be more strategic about you know, moving the funding to where the needs really are. So on the one hand, and I'm kind of a visual person, so on the one hand, if we can better quantify our needs from our tribal sector, then when we're approaching the philanthropy sector, we can plug that money in better. We can better align where the funding should be going. Because right now it's kind of, it's just kind of a hodgepodge. It's kind of like, you know, one year a foundation might support a certain initiative and the next year it might be something different. But wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually have it much more strategic and really kind of work together? So that's really where we're wanting this to go, and why these listening sessions are so important. So again, please fill out the survey, and in that way we can kind of advocate better. And then also in the philanthropy sector as well, it was said earlier Joe put it in the chat there, it's less than 0.5% right now philanthropic dollars are reaching our Native communities. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to really create more awareness and more connections. And so we're literally talking about, if we were just to shift that 0.5% to just even 1%, just, and even that I feel like is still just scratching the surface. But if we could just shift it to that, that means we'd have $5 billion going to support our Native communities and our initiatives. So there's incredible opportunity to really elevate some of the great work that's happening out there, and to support it. And even beyond that, not just 1%. What about 2%? What about 5%? What about 10%? So just think of what that could mean for our Native communities. So this is why we are doing this. And this is, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, this is really just the start. The listening sessions is kind of phase 1. And then phase 2 is where we will dig more into the actual programming side to support the needs that we're hearing from our communities. And also, it gives us an opportunity to really shed light on the tribal giving programs that are out there. Like you heard of the amazing work that Shakopee has been doing for many, many years. And they have an incredible history of giving, and it's just part of their culture. And I'm just so thankful that we have people like them that have really been leading the way for many, many years, and some of their tribal leaders that have really kind of set the standards. So the programming, by the way, I wanted to share this. We are starting some of it. So I mentioned earlier the Tribal Philanthropy Coalition. So if you are interested in joining that group, just feel free to email me and I'll put you on that list. And my email was put in the chat earlier, but we'll, oh, thank you. So Kelsey just reposted it. So the Tribal Philanthropy Coalition really is about coming together as tribal communities and supporting each other and learning from each other. So we have different spotlight speakers. We have different tribes that present on what their programs look like. And then we're moving towards where we can, develop more like strategies together. So they meet monthly. We will be meeting in person as well at our upcoming conference. And we have other program areas that we can support you all. So we have a national group that meets on early childhood education currently right now. We have a national group that meets on climate and conservation work. And then we have other youth engagement initiatives that NAP is involved with. And we're getting more into looking at language and culture and research. So there are topic specific areas that we work on, and we would love for you all to join. So just connect with us, send us an email, and then we can connect you and what your areas of interest are, and then we can kind of connect you to the appropriate support group. And then let's see. Oh yeah. And then in terms of announcements, I just a couple more announcements. One, I just mentioned our conference, and it was just put in the chat there. So it will be in Seattle on June 26th through the 29th. And we're hosting that with APIP. And there's really a really interesting history with APIP and NAP, and we kind of helped get each other started when there really wasn't representation of Native peoples in philanthropy. So that's kind of the, the real beginnings of Native Americans in philanthropy, was just trying to get our voices and our needs heard. So I hope you all can join us in Seattle. It'll be nice weather, I hope. I don't want to jinx us, so hopefully it'll be really nice weather. And then also I'm going to release in the chat right now our recent DAP report. This is a really interesting report on Indigenous professionals that are working within philanthropy. So hopefully you'll take a look at that and learn some valuable information from that report. And there's other reports that we're working on. The big one that we're working towards is, after these listening sessions, we will release a report on everything that we've heard in terms of what the needs of our communities are regionally and nationally, where they feel like philanthropy could best support them, how philanthropy can better connect and support our Native communities. And as I mentioned, highlighting our tribal philanthropic programs. And then lastly, I want to share with you all some great news in terms of funding. So one of our core partners, Native Voices Rising, NVR, they are a Native-led organization, and it's made up by the Common Council, which is all Native people from across the nation. So it's truly Native-led and making the decisions. They will be able to award out over $2 million last year to 88 different organizations. And they just reopened their funding cycle again. I think it was yesterday or the day before. So make sure you go to their website if you're interested in seeking funding from them. And we are actively right now helping to raise more money for them. So we're trying to increase that significantly from the $2 million. So that is in the works. Excited that Shakopee shared their new portal. I'm really excited about that. And that's kind of a step forward too, as we're growing and developing our programs. The fact that they have a portal like that is really exciting. So I'm glad that they were able to post that for everybody. And then in addition to those things, as I mentioned, we're getting calls all the time from different foundations. So we are working with them to really just advocate and invest more funding to our communities. So we recently had one foundation, they committed to $1 million to support Native communities. We had another one at $3.5 million. We're working on 2 other funds right now. One will support climate and conservation work, and it can help tribes in meeting some of the match requirements with the recent NIFWIF announcement. So there's out of that funding, there was $1 billion challenge grant made by the America the Beautiful initiative and 30 by 30. And then out of that, 10% of that is for tribes. But there was a matching requirement within that. And so we talked about that with them. And so through our new Tribal Nations Conservation Fund, we can actually help you to fulfill that matching requirement. So we already have the money in hand. So that is available to you all. So we're excited about that. And this particular fund, we think will reach tens of millions of dollars. So and it can support conservation work. It can support things like land back. It can support some of the restoration of our waterways and our land, and even species mitigation, or species, what's the word I'm looking for, Joel? Just restoration and management of our species. So we're excited about that. And there's a few other things we're working on to really support different tribes. And we also are working with the Native serving organizations out there, such as NCAI and ATNI and USET and some of the other foundations out there. So we're doing a lot to try to help coordinate this and just make it more strategic, I guess you'd say, more impactful. And so I guess that's probably it. I probably said enough. And winding down, just want to really thank you all for your time today. Thank our NAP team for all of their hard work and dedication in making these happen. So thank you to Dawn and her team, and Kelsey and Tony and Joe. And we have some other people that have helped us too with the survey, like Rebecca. So we really appreciate all of your hard work. And once again, thank you, Joel. So I just wish everybody out there continued health and safety. And so in our Yurok language, we would say Waklau. And it kind of is, it's more than just a thank you. It's like a deep appreciation and gratefulness to you all for being here with us today. So thank you. And I hope that it was helpful to you all. And I will turn it back to you, Joel.
Yeah, Greg, thank you. And that's a great way to end this session. Appreciate all the hard work that you've done to organize this and create this Tribal Nations initiative, really set us on this path. And it's exciting. And you just talked about a bunch of funding opportunities. So I hope we're gonna the folks on the call today we'll jump on those resources, and we're gonna spread that word across Indian country about all these exciting opportunities. And that NAP's here to help. If it's with those matching dollars, the hard dollars that are hard, difficult to find back at your tribe, we don't want that to be a barrier to access some of these opportunities, like the conservation funding. And Dr. Payment mentioned the importance of protecting and restoring our lands and waters. And so this is another opportunity that tribes have in order to accomplish those goals. And NAP's here to help, providing matching funds, and to provide some assistance and working your way through those processes. So exciting stuff, and only more to come. So I really appreciate everybody, especially our panelists, our esteemed panelists, and all the team that worked hard on this, and for those who are watching us over Zoom. So have a great day, great weekend, and look forward to seeing you again.